Recording in progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Keep it short and sweet before the presentation. I'm happy to bring here with us the executive director, Eagle, and I'm sad to say this is our last evening program here. This is our last lecture here, but that doesn't mean we don't have good programming upcoming. This Saturday is Archaeology Day. Indiana Archaeology Month is September, and we are going to have a great training out in the field with Purdue anthropology students, do artifact identification. I encourage you to come out and visit. And then, of course, it is September, which means Feast of the Hunter's Moon is in less than a month. If you haven't gotten your ticket, definitely do so soon, and we hope to see you there. But now, the reason you're all here, Frank Donaldson has been a Highland Park district for he can share that for a long time. He's the perfect person to get our presentation today. And with that,
thank you. So I'm actually the backup guy. Susan Bradford, who is the president of the neighborhood association, had some hip surgery or knee surgery and asked me to cover, but I'm not a gifted speaker. I hope I'm talking loud enough. I know I'll need you to talk loud if you ask me any questions. I'm thrilled to see so many people I know here, but also thrilled to the people I don't know that are here. The answer to how long I've been in Highland Park for 43 years. I moved here in 1980 from Indianapolis. I was raised in Anderson, Indiana. I don't think they have a Highland Park over there. It was a pretty cool town when I was there, but hopefully making a comeback. I live, if you don't know much about Highland Park, that's what you're here for, and I'll try and educate you. But I do want to start out by who either lives or has lived in Highland Park. Let me get a sense for the home team here. Here. So you can cover me and reveal it here, but the thing I learned from one of my fraternity brothers here is we're going to say a lot of things that is the truth and maybe not the truth, but either way, I want you to spread it around anyway. That's the new world we live in, right? Trying to create your own truth. So anyway, you people that know things, or if you hear something that I'm not clear on, please clarify for me. It's not a lecture, it's a very participatory thing. I'm just gonna take what I know in my 43 years, and then in the last week or couple of weeks, I've been able to work with the staff and they've helped me with some things. So I'm gonna start out with this picture, and then I'm gonna take it from somewhere. I only have about 5 or 6 pictures in here. And this is actually, in a second, I'm going to have you act like it's the 1890s. And Dave Sattler is going to help us a little bit with some of the music, but I can set you up a little bit. Okay, maybe Mark Lundstrom too can jump in. He's pretty musical. What you point out here is downtown Lafayette. I think most of you recognize the view, like from the Chamber of Commerce or the jewelry store or the corner of the courthouse. My business was right here. I'm guessing this is like 1920s, but the point is here, you can see the wires to the electrify the trolley. And the trolley, there is a book at the Historical Association with a lot of information on just the trolleys and the trains that came here. But you can see that here's a horse-drawn carriage, but yet here looks like a car. So that's the 20s. But the 1890s, I think we had a lot of those. We didn't have very many of those. The 3 transportation things was the river was a big deal. Lafayette was a river town, you all know that. And the commerce was a lot to do with the river. I suppose the railroads, but I don't really know. Bicycles were in vogue then. And of course, this trolley has a lot to do with the origins of Highland Park. And I'll try and share some little bits about that. So with that said, we're going to the 1890s now. The music of the time, I mean, I don't know much about the fashion. You didn't come here to learn about that, but what I read is ladies were no longer in those bustles and things and trying to wear free flowing dresses, and men were no longer in those William Taft 3-piece suits, or starting to move through that. Dave, here's where you come in with the music. The 3 or 4 songs here is Ta Ra Ra Boom Da. Ta Ra Ra Boom Da. Okay. Hot time in the old house tonight. Hot time. Okay, you feeling? And you're all in the 1890s. You feeling it? Sousa's marches. We don't have to do that. And then the other one I found right at the end is a bicycle built for 2. So back to what I'm talking about is Lafayette existed as a downtown, functioning as a downtown, the commerce, the clothing stores and all that. And that's kind of again, not an 1890, more of a 1920 picture, but that's what worked. It's not that there weren't houses in other places. And so I'm going to put in the historical reference, 1811, the Battle of Tippecanoe. If you want to know more about that, go up the road. Indiana statehood, 1816. Lafayette platted, 1825. Incorporated, 1853. Civil War, 65. Purdue, 1869. So it's coming towards us. And here at I guess a county seat at the time, though somebody might correct me on that, but Lafayette is working, and it's happening, and it's going on, and people are living downtown and maybe living in some of the perimeter houses. If you look there on 6th Street Hill and 4th Street there, and I don't really know what was going on to the north side. But let me come back then to this the other things going on in the area a little bit. 1893 was at Chicago World's Fair, which gets a lot of credit for kind of waking up things about design and all these countries that came here. I mean, it was a significant event, so I'm told. Somebody told me this, so correct me when you find out I'm wrong, but that they bought the land from a farmer up where Columbian Park is. It wasn't called Columbian Park yet, but it was to dig the lagoon to have the water and use the hill, the gravity, so that Lafayette would have a water source. So a lot of little things were happening to make Lafayette grow. Again, the other thing that comes in is this Columbian theme, which Columbia School and Columbian Park and Columbia Streets and all that was. All this 1892 was the 400th anniversary of 1492 in Columbus. So the Columbia Exposition in Chicago, Columbian Park here, it's all tied to recognizing the national history, and so that's part of it. So that's where we kind of fit historically. I don't think Columbian Park had Monkey Island at that point, but it came later, and there'll be more on Monkey Island afterwards. You find Dave, he can tell you all about it. Good old Monkey Island. So this again, there's a book with a lot more information than I have about the transit system and the trains from Fort Wayne and how they transitioned to get you hooked up with the trolley system here. They ran into West Lafayette, if it was even West Lafayette then, or was it Chauncey, I don't know. And it hooked up to get to Indianapolis. It hooked up all these things, but the one significant to where I'm at with Highland Park is it went up 9th Street Hill. And it might, and there's some people that have some more knowledge than I do on that. And I used to think the terminus was 9th and Kossuth, but it wasn't. It actually went on up to Owen Street and actually turned into Owen Street. And you'll see that in one of the pictures of one of the houses later on, that it was very accessible. And the land up there was called Reynolds pasture. I don't know who Reynolds was, James Reynolds, but he was the landowner up there. And some 2 familiar names to people that know Lafayette a little bit are the Ross brothers, William and David Ross. Need I explain all those contributions from Ross Gear to Ross Aid to several other things? were the original owners of that. Now I'm going to see if I know how to do this. Well, I'm not going to move to that yet. I'll speak more about them later. But they formed the Highland Park Land Company. And I'll show you their business card in a second and some of the stuff that they do. And they partnered with this Reynolds guy up there, and this concept that was consistent with these what was happening in other places. Chicago had an area called Riverside. Indianapolis had Golden Hill. You know where I mean, up off 38th Street, where the clay courts or the what's that country club there? But anyway, and Hewlin, actually in the 1920s in Lebanon, was one of these. And what they refer to this as the Victorian garden landscape design. And Highland Park was a planned community, and they hired a couple of dudes. Now here, I think I can find them. They still had those funny suits on back then. You still got yours?
I do.
Mark, you still got yours? Should have had you wear it. I believe this is either Mr. Earnshaw. He did not sell cough drops. But this is the Cincinnati group that was hired to do this garden landscape. And I know they have one called Crapo or Crapo Park up north of St. Louis on the Mississippi. They were doing more like cemeteries. And if you think of this large cemeteries at that time, the roads fit the contour that the ravine provided, and they applied their urban landscape design to the area of Reynolds pasture to create Highland Park. Then I'll talk a little more about, have you seen enough of those guys? All right, there's the business card. I'm not sure what's in the picture there. There's the real business card and how they promoted it. The concept was with the trolley, it was accessible and you could get out of the clamoring downtown. Do you remember it being kind of, a downtown where it's noisy? So fine residences, moderate prices. It doesn't say it here as much as it does here. And I think I have this picture coming up later, but since I have this right here, no noise, no dust, no alleys, overlooks the entire city, lots 75 to 150 feet frontage. So it was an opportunity to access the downtown and the Carmets and all the good stuff, but not have to live down there. Now, Perrin Avenue is the first attempt, and it's still there, and it had its strengths. And the houses are still there. You know, where everyone know where Perrin Avenue is. Somebody lived there. You'd say more about it, but it predates Highland Park. But Highland Park has kind of sustained some things that I'll speak to later. Their office, the Highland Park Land Company, was at 188 Main Street. You wouldn't find that today, but if you got on Main Street and you got to where the fountain is, that had to be about 188. You'd cross there. You know, you remember when they moved the depot down there from its former spot there. So it was right in the core of the area. And of course, they let me see if I'm on where I want to be here. It was a healthy place and perfect drainage. These are important issues to people.
Frank, how could you? This reminds me of the 15 minutes walk from the courthouse. That seems a bit exaggerated to me. Like totally untruth.
You know, they also, it doesn't say it. You can do it in 15 minutes.
Well, people walk faster in those days. You ever see Charlie Chaplin?
They could really move. You know, there may be some, but they just tried to make it appealing. There was even something I read that isn't mentioned there, that the train left it was such regularity that the train ride was every 15 minutes or so. I mean, it wasn't just for Highland Park, but it was to capture the movement. I mean, there weren't cars, there might be horses, but they're carriages, but it was hopefully inefficient, but the only choice you had to get from A to B. I don't know, we'll time it later on. I'd only be speculating. I mean, it seemed to be, there are no alleys. And, the other thing I want to say, lest I might say it later when I show the houses, so pardon me if I repeat myself. If you go through Highland Park now and you see an attached garage, it's not one of the original houses. And it wasn't really, and even what's there, in most cases, wasn't a house, it was a carriage house. So it wasn't just for the vehicle, it probably had some residential capability there. So a lot of things you just kind of have to think too. I don't know why alleys would be a liability. Where did they put their trash out? I don't know. We just put it out front. We still don't have alleys, so we're getting by.
I figured it out. It's 15-minute porch ride to the courthouse maybe.
On the beautiful cement walk. Were there sidewalks in other places, or were they, what was it like on downtown? Back to that original picture, I mean, obviously there was sidewalks around the courthouse square, but it'd be all speculation, and again, any thoughts on that? Alleys?
There was alleys outside of that area.
Yeah,
You
between
know,
10th and 9th, they had an alley.
He said there were alleys outside that. If you went on the other side of 9th Street to the east, the alleys right there. And there are homes on 9th Street Hill, Ball Mansion and some of those things. I didn't look at Europe up there. That, but they were kind of unique to that. I don't know the downside of alleys. But think of them as being places where you can go out and have a cigarette. I don't know, but that's a good observation. But they clearly it is trying to make it appealing and attract the owners. I don't even know what I got up here next. Well, there is what Larry brought, one of these. And there's a whole down at the office. There's a whole book. It's like they're like only 20 of them were sold. The certificates, but the certificates, some represented several shares of stock, some of them few shares of stock. But I mean, this was the real deal. This was an entrepreneurial adventure. How are you? Highland Park Walker. You could jump in anytime. But it was a sophisticated company of the late 1890s that then attracted a lot of I don't know the names, but if you look you can look at that book down there and see David Ross had several shares of stock. I can assure you that, and I'm sure a lot of the owners not only owned the property but were invested in the company itself. Maybe they're still for sale. I don't know. You'll have to talk to your representative. So somebody was asking, and I don't want to make the assumption that everyone knows where we are here. And you're going to like the next one better. But here's Cassuth Street. And let me think. We're looking north. We're looking north. And here's 9th and Cassuth right here, where they put in the bricks that they're going to have to take out. And all the things there. And again, I always thought that was the terminus. Am I blocking you? But here the trolley came all the way down to Owen Street and came in here. And again, this is phase one. You're saying, well, what about Cherokee? That won't be in this picture, but there's a second phase that brought in the houses on Cherokee, and that's the one that goes right up to where the golf course is. And some very elegant homes there facing south, and then it kind of runs to 4th Street. So the roads that define Highland Park then and today Or then was Cassuth, 9th, Owen, and then 4th Street doesn't quite make it because Highland Park comes right in here. And then there's where I'll mention Highland School later on, right there. But it didn't really go quite to 4th Street. So drive up there and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then my house, there's a this little swiggle here is called Glenway Lane, and it was platted. It's down in my ravine, it's the backyard, and it's actually shifted in time, but you know Glenway Lane because you played in the ravine. So but Glenway Lane is the bottom of the ravine.
I didn't know.
And I'll show you more about that. And it was platted, but it's the backyards of all the houses on Highland Avenue. Yeah, Highland is the main road, 9th to Cassuth. You come on Highland, you know, you got speed bumps in there. Is everybody with me on that? But you don't come all the way to 4th. You get all the way to 4th Street, but you get to Central or Owen, and then 4th Street runs right here. Making sense? You ready for the next part? It's more interesting than that. Any questions on that? And that's how it is today, except today, Cherokee is there, and there's houses, Kentmore, and some people live right in there. Yes, Steve?
Did you show it where your house?
What's that?
Show it where your house.
I mean, my house is a little one-story stucco, 830 Shawnee. And my backyard, I have a little area there, and then it dips down into a ravine, into the ravine. I think if there was a bicycle bridge, I'm either 93 or 92. There's kind of a pie-shaped lot, but on Shawnee Circle, and so right over here. The grand houses are all over here. So you got me now here back on Cherokee and all those houses, and then the country club. Did you know that there was a third phase of Highland Park? That what you're looking at now is where the Lafayette Country Club is. So let me take you back to Owen Street. And the new Cherokee doesn't really dip like that. It goes straight through. And Highland School sits where Highland Park would have picked up again and came all the way through. I'm guessing the country club sits about right here. And then it had these 3 entrances off of 9th Street. It doesn't look like there's any access off 4th Street, but that was the plan. Again, so sequentially, there were like the 1890s were the original houses in Highland Park. And then there was my house was 1923, 100 years old this year. And a lot of the houses were built in 1923. The bicycle bridge was built in 1923. The Highland School by a different name was built in 1923. So that was the second phase. So somewhere between 1891 and 1923, the country club, which I think was 1907, I looked it up and now I forget what the date was, that the Lafayette Country Club purchased the land and got in ahead. So anyway, did you all know that could have been Highland Park?
Well, is the reason because they couldn't sell the lots and it became a country club?
I'd only be speculating there. I mean, I think that I should do a little more research. It's that the country club was probably pretty aggressive, but here they didn't do it. The country club beat them to it. And so now that could all change here because I was going to speak to it later, but you all know Bob Williamson and Jim Andrew, and for that matter, Jim Ricks, all lived in Highland Park and now have built elegant homes by today's standards right on the rim of Highland Park. Jim Ricks more closer to a lot of that has to do with the country club today, but they have elegant homes by today's design. But I don't know why it happened, or there's probably an answer to that. Supply and demand, or maybe we'll build it in the future, and then the country club be into it. I thought I read too that the country club was 18 holes originally. Anybody know more about
We
that?
learned how to play golf.
What was your handicap? Just kidding.
I would only be sad.
Yes.
So, do you know the date? Is that a date down in the corner for the second phase?
I think it's 1896, if I'm reading it right. I think it was,
So only like 3 years later, because it looks like they sold about 30 lots down in Cherokee. But if it got to be the 20s and the Depression came in, it makes sense that well, they were
I think I read 1907 was when the country club.
Okay.
What's that?
1909.
Okay. But within a range there that there was time for that to be done, and it wasn't done. We researched that for, next year, we're gonna have the same talk, and you'll forget everything I said. And I'll try and correct that question there.
I have 2 questions on this map. 2 questions. on
Okay.
this map. What is the southern border? What's?
I'd only be speculating, if you know now, the country club has 6 holes to the north, the country club, and then it goes down into that swale for the back 3 holes, and then it runs into, what do you call that neighborhood? Before you get to Cassuth Street, but where Don Teeter and Jerry Brand. So I would guess it runs, maybe not to Keel Road, but it might. But look at the size of some of those lots.
Yeah, that was the other question. That bottom right. 70, that's huge. Did anybody ever buy that? Is there a structure on that?
They must have had something in mind, because it'd been just as easy to subdivide it more.
Or is there a structure on that today?
No, that's all, I really don't know how far the country club goes. I don't have any point of reference for that, but I do know that the hill goes up there, like the 9th hole at the country club is up on that ledge there, and then it drops down. But I just know that this was laid out. Look how little these lots are, and look how huge that one there. You could put 10 of those, 15 of those.
Was anything ever built south of Cherokee?
No, just the
Okay,
second hole in the country club. Now Highland School. Highland on the other pictures. I guess it shows just well here. At Cherokee, the Highland School sits right here. So in 1896, it wasn't here yet. By 1923, it was built. And then this Cherokee became the end of Highland Park, and then this is where the second and third hole of the country club are. Yeah, I just saw this picture for the first time when I was doing this research, so I could make some stuff up, but I really don't know. You know anything about that? These are 2 residents that lived in Bobby Bucket's house, Bobby Reynold's house, the purple house or lavender house on 9th Street. They grew up there.
And we went to the country club all the time, but there was a Tice edition built down there in the lower part.
Tice edition of that footprint.
Yeah, if you go down the hill, I don't know. It was on 4th Street, but it came back.
Over to the west. It might be incorporated in that. I mean, maybe this right here. I'm not sure it tells me what street that is. I think 4th Street is still over here, so there are some houses.
Yeah, there's some houses under where the swimming pool used to be. I don't even know. What's the Tices? Then the golf course, and then up the other hill was an addition that the
I mean, anything about that phase, because it was never built, would be speculation on my part, but there would be. What's her name to help me with the research? Amy, yeah, I mean, maybe you can get into that stuff. I mentioned that book about, if you're curious about the transit, it's just a little book about like this one. And but it's very interesting. But again, I don't know. I'd always heard that there was a plan to develop it further, because when they marketed it originally, they talked about green space. And I had this for probably okay to bring it up now. The only green space we have is really used. There's a big triangle right in the middle, see if I can make that go backwards. The Shawnee Circle, and that's what I live on, and the house is there. The big triangle is right here, it's used all the time. Dog walkers, there, we put some bench, or the Historical Association put some benches right there, people gather there all the time. My kids used to play a turkey bowl football game, except the pass routes went into Highland Avenue, and there was some beer flowing sometimes too, I think, but became a little too dangerous, so they moved it to Jeff High School. But that's a very used green space. We'll be there Sunday for the Highland Park Neighborhood Association picnic. The other space, which doesn't even show here, is there's a little bitty triangle here. We used to have a fall gathering there and block off the street and go out into the streets. And it was just the poor kids, so here on this side of the ravine would go there, and we'd have our fall picnic there and have bike races and things. But now the wisdom is to they put it in flowers, and it's probably a good idea. It's not enough space to do anything other than use it once a year, whereas the big triangle is used all the time. So
Like kick the can, baseball.
on the big triangle, it still goes on. As a matter of fact, there's right in the middle, not really in the middle, there's one of those geological survey discs with the information. There's a couple of them downtown too, I could show you. Dave knows where they are. But it kind of defines it too, and it's a great home plate. If you're right here and you're hitting, we call it the pink house. It kind of flares out like that, and you can play ball. You were saying we used to have volleyball there. One time I thought Joe Bumbleberg might be here. I think most of you know Joe or who he is. He's a Highland Park original, and he was somebody who was asking, "Can we have a wedding there?" Went to him as an attorney, but also the Highland Park guy. And he goes, "Go ahead," you know. And so I've seen what people have weddings there. They get the city to block off the street. I don't think there's any charge. You want to have a wedding there, have a wedding there. But it's very seldom on a night day do you not see people out there. It's also, I guess while I'm on this part of it here, I'm going to talk about just some of the general features. And I'm back on this one because this exists. Remember the other one that didn't. Everything's connected. I said the bicycle bridge was built in 1923. In 2007, when that Minneapolis bridge collapsed, all the insurance carriers for all the bridges everywhere said, "Let's go check our bridges. It can't happen to us." And it got shut down. It didn't look like it was major, but it was amazing how it disrupted everybody's routines, dog walkers and strollers and everything. I mean, you now had to see if I can find it all, but you couldn't cross on the bicycle bridge. You had to go all the way around to get to anything. The origin of the bicycle bridge was to give access to Highland School and not have to go across the ravine or take that long route. And so anyway, it shut down, and it turned out it wasn't anything real structural. If you've been over, you can see some exposed rebar and stuff down there, and they hired actually I think bridges are the jurisdiction of the counties, but Tony raised the money or found the money to fix that, and it was much appreciated. They did more than that, but they didn't make it beautiful. They just made it acceptable to open up again and opened up the traffic lane so the neighborhood could really function. The sidewalks themselves are really important. I mean, you can. If you could send kids out and say you can't cross the street, they could still get to the other side of Highland by just staying on the sidewalk and crossing the bridge. You have wonderful access. I mean, there are places where you have to cross the street over on the outside the circle. I want to mention too the porches, especially the older houses. If you look at those, one is the Risk House. It was before Kirby's dad was the first one there. He farmed somewhere in the south and then came up. There's a whole page back here if you want to read up on that more. Somebody here knows more than I do. And William Jennings Bryant was his friend, And there's pictures of William Jennings Bryant having meals at the Risk House there on Owen Street. But they all had portraits, and they were, people, I don't know what they did, but they didn't have TVs, or if they did, they had phonographs. They could listen to Boom Da and music, but I don't know if they played cards or rode bicycles or just kind of, that's where they taught thumb twiddling back then. But the porches are significant. So I mentioned the garages earlier, and then the front porches, but also sleeping porches. I mean, there wasn't air conditioning, so if a lot of my house even had a little sleeping porch. We have since enclosed it and got air conditioning. Got a new air conditioner recently. Come over and try it out sometime. So then I mentioned the carriage houses in the garages. I would invite you to drive through. There's some exceptions. Randy Roberts' house, I think, is one of the original houses, but they added a garage. I think if you had a carriage house, and I don't know what you did with your horse. If you kept your horse too, if it was a horse-drawn one, you may not want the garage attached to the house. But I think it's just an observation that I've done more since I was asked to do this talk, to pay attention to some things, such things. Highland School functioned. I moved here in 1980, and Highland School was a functioning LSC school. And then I forget who they sold it to. Actually, Kent Moore, who just won some recognition. Anyway, Sagamore or something like that. As the attorney to the school corporation, has a lot to say about that. If you ever are with Kent and you don't know what to talk about, bring up the sale of the Highland Park School or something. So the bicycle bridge and the ravine really go together. The ravine, we had talks with the sisters here about the early days and back then. There is this book. I used to have 2 copies. I loaned them out too much. Maybe I had 3 copies, and they don't find their way back. But it was Sherry Helmkamp and Connie Lutz did a book on the bicycle bridge. And what makes it entertaining is just little anecdotal stories. Janet Glatz Rush, who Jim Rush's wife was Janet Glatz back then. And I used to see her walking across the bicycle bridge before she passed away, just in wonderment. There's a story about Tom Schumann, and they used to go down in the ravine and shoot bows and arrows and dip them in gasoline and like fire. But the best story is, I think it's either a John Schumann or a Tom Schumann story, is a lady that's in here, a lady that wanted to find her missing dog, so she summons some of the boys, the Schumann boys, and gave them all dog biscuits to lure the dog in. If you read it, you figure out it's John that ate his. It's called John dang, I let me that be Tom or something. A lot of stories there, but the kids used to play. There's pictures of ball fields down in the ravine. You couldn't find those today. I don't know if it just grown in more, or there's more mosquitoes now than there were in the old days. But it's still a feature. And there's a path, that Glenway Lane is still there right behind my house. I've got steps, about 3 houses that have steps. Most of the houses have fences up that kind of block it off. To me, it's a feature. And in the fall, it gives me access. In the summer, privacy. The leaves come up, and my little deck back there is hidden. And then in the winter, it's kind of a pretty view. And our little sleeping porch, we view that way, kind of like your house. We're inside enjoying the outside, watching Tommy No-Tail and all the other squirrels, and got names for half the critters that come up there. I had critters on my list, but I also had trees on my list about Highland Park. And Larry Rose, tell me that number again, or you stand up and tell them what you did for Highland Park.
We started several years ago in Highland Park. We planted, at the end of this year, we will have planted 129 trees in Highland Park. Part of the reason is because Highland Park, when it started, just planted all American elms on both sides of the sidewalk. And as the elms were destroyed by the virus, Dutch elm disease, they replaced them with ash trees. Now they're gone. So we've been doing different varieties of trees, 129 trees. We water all the time. We watered 8,000 trees last year, and we watered 4,000 this year.
I water mine regularly just for fear that Larry would drive by sometime. But anyway, no, but there's been the trees have added a lot of beauty and dimension to, we recently got some historic street lamps. We got to choose between a couple of them, and there's one that kind of glares into my house, but I guess I'm used to it now. And actually currently, not my house, but and it's a 3 or 4 phase project. 2 years ago was the first phase. We're getting curbs there, which really, if you've ever noticed, when the city does curbs or some of those streetscapes that they do, not just downtown, but to the north a little bit, it just steps everything up, you know. I mean, all the houses look, oh, they take care of their yards more, but Highland Park is still getting some attention. I wanted to mention the street names too, that we have a lot of, I mean, there's Owen and Central and Highland that aren't, but you know, Wea, Cherokee, Wyandotte, Shawnee. I suppose we just paid tribute to the area at one time. Clearly, the ravine was once a creek at least, and maybe even a river as it finds its way across 4th Street and behind Miller School to do that. And like any neighborhood with that's kind of a woods there, we get a lot of critters. 3 deer in the middle of the triangle last night, not the big triangle, in the middle of Shawnee, the big house there, which you don't like. You try and shoo them back down because they'll go out to 9th Street or Kossuth. Who knows what'll happen there. I won't go into all the others. All the neighborhoods are probably dealing with that. I think it's the water shortage. Is you see a lot of deer coming up from, because you do have, is water flowing? Well, they need access to water. I wasn't gonna bring up Scooter, but Scooter used to, that's another story for afterwards. Scooter used to have a hole in his gutter, and he put a plastic swimming pool underneath of it, and then put a salt lick next to it. All the deer would come up. He meant well, but I'm not sure he was really doing him any favors, so.
Question about the ravine. Is the ravine, you know, you keep talking about, it sounds like a nice place. Is it accessible to the public, and is there a trail?
You could, you know, that Glenway Lane, technically, if you wanted to see the ravine, right there, right off Wyandotte, I don't know. I mean, Kent Schutte used to live right there. If you come in off Kossuth and you'll see the access, but you have to know to look for it, because sometimes there's a car park there. They don't want to encourage people to drive back there. Whenever a tree falls and knocks our electricity out, that's the access. So technically, you'd be on a accessible Glenway Lane at the bottom of the ravine, and you'd be in my backyard. So I said, I think I'm 109.
That's actually a road you can drive on.
But they can take.
I was talking.
They take trucks down there to clear trees.
Okay.
But it's not a paved road. But you could notice it there, and there's a house here, and this house here is the big house with the carriage house behind it that you see when you come, you know, 9th and Kossuth and Highland, you know, maybe it'll show here in a minute. So I'm not sure what you can see there. I do campfires, I already say that, behind line. I've got steps. There's only about 3 houses that have steps. I haven't done them before. I did one last year, and that was the first one when the kids were young to go down. So Glenway Lane is still platted, still exists, would still be accessible without trespassing, but we all own the land right now to Glenway Lane in my type
So
shape.
you can park up on Wyandotte.
Yeah, you can just park right there and walk back. As a matter of fact, I call them race flowers. I don't know what they are. They're like phlox or something. They're beautiful, fragrant blue flowers that come out the end of May, and they're plentiful right there. And I take them. They even last for about a week. So if you're not, don't take all my flowers, but
No, I'm not gonna take any flowers.
but they're all accessible to you. That's for sure. I printed copies of I don't think too many. Did you get one or?
Yeah.
But there was it's really a pretty nice little poem about the bicycle bridge, and I don't know who wrote it. If anyone nostalgically wants to read it or make a paper airplane out of it, they're here for you. I mentioned that Williamson and Andrew, and who knows what's next. I thought that had John Schumann, who passed away, is also involved with the country club, and at one time had June preceded him in death that he might have built in between them. They are like we're like three musketeers. But I don't know what the future is. I mean, maybe there'll be some more building on the country club. But I'm not here to say that that's going to happen, but it's happened with two houses has found a way to do it. I also want to promote Krug, our watering hole there at night to Kossuth there. Chris Johnson has given us a place that you could walk and then stumble home if you want to. And they got little buttons on to cross the street safely, even though they're going to redo that intersection. But
Why are they going to do that?
when
They get paid by the hour.
well, if it doesn't really bother me, but I've heard people complain about it, that there's too much traffic there. So the design that works downtown in areas where there's not so much traffic, the pavers have performed adequately. But the whole reason they did that in the first place was drainage issues. And so whatever they did, it's kind of like the West Lafayette Lindbergh Bridge, where they tried some shortcut to get this done, and well, it didn't work. So $750,000 later, we're going to redo it. It's not performing, and I don't know. I've never had a problem with it, but if you look at it, you can see a little bit of that. But I think most paver roads. There's some in front of our church that they just laid down, Central Presbyterian, down across from the east end of the new parking garage at City Hall, and there's a lot of areas. And he's not here, but Jones, Ken Jones has been a real advocate for the pavers or bricks or whatever you want to call them as part of the character of the community. And I don't care if you had any new ones, but let's keep the ones we got. They actually are right in Highland Park in two different areas. They create the road, and why those made it and the ones at 9 and Kossuth don't. Again, I just be speculating. Well, I'm about done. I want to make sure that I thank the people at TCHA that helped me. Maybe it's time for me to get my membership and my Highland Park membership. Pay that Sunday when I go to that picnic. But I've loved living there. I might have mentioned, I raised 3 boys there, and all their friends that they're still friends with. Not many of the originals still live there, but we had those years there where they all walked at that time Miller School, and they come and knock on the door, and there's stories within stories there, and maybe a few vodka bottles in the bushes. We always blamed it on the neighbor, but who knows? But it was a great neighborhood. And what I guess I'll finish with, I think it's now what it was originally, a very desirable community. We get a lot of young families now, a lot of them. Just had a new one, move in, he's at the Mitch Daniels School of Business. He's a professor from what's Pittsburgh University, Carnegie. Anyway, and a lot of kids. So we're real careful to slow people. We got speed bumps and things on Highland, but it's, I met you all could have as nice a communities, but I would say Highland Park, right, Mark, it's a great place to raise kids back in the old days. And Phil, you're a strong resident too. I see you walking a lot, I'll tell you that. So I'll address any questions, and I hope I covered it adequately. I don't want to take up too much time. It's starting to get dark and maybe it's going to rain. I don't know. What can I cover for you? And if you don't have any, I'll stick around here a little bit anyway.
Is that all your pictures?
Pardon me?
Is that all your pictures?
Oh, no, I got some pictures of some houses. Now I have to get a new frame.
Okay.
Not the first one I've ever broken. Thank you. I don't have a lot to say about these because I don't have the addresses, but there you were talking about, obviously plant trees there. You thought you saw them on both sides. I can't even tell you exactly where they are, but proud of their sidewalks. That might be, clearly on a curve. When I look out my front door, I see the big house across from me. where Dr. McLennan used to live and where it's empty now. Jason Abbott bought it and mows it and,
I used to babysit.
but then I see the house next to them, I see they're nicely designed, but I see the sides of two houses across my street because it curves right there.
Yeah.
I think this is, I don't know, that's who took the picture. I think that's, oh yeah, Owen Street, and that might be the Risk House. If you look there, those are original houses. They'd have these big porches I alluded to and the carriage houses behind. There are a whole bunch more of these. You could actually get on the Highland Park website. I don't think you'd have any, you might have to get by, I don't think it costs any money, but you might have to do something. So here's where, this is Owen Street, and there's the track that went in and made, so you could get up in the morning, get that 15-minute train and get down to the courthouse in 15 minutes, coming out here to 9th Street and shooting down there. Of course, we don't have those trees again, Larry.
Right, those tracks used to go to Soldier's Home.
Oh, they did. So the tracks went all the way to Soldier's Home. They went to the Monon shop, which probably, if you ordered the Monon shop, was probably there to service. It went all the way back.
It went all the way to the battlefield,
We did. Well, that's great. I think it went further, it might have gone further south in Owen Street too. And of course, when you, in that book, all these
But it wasn't her.
Fort Wayne and Indianapolis trains that been hooked up, because there was a significant accident. From that Fort Wayne train, and I don't know if it was before it transitioned into the trolley system. I don't know whether they're called trolleys or streetcars, but the book has a whole couple pages on this horrible accident that happened because somebody fell asleep at the wheel or something.
Is that a dirt street? If so, when did they start to pave them?
Would somebody smarter than me know what's going on with streets back there? It doesn't look like doesn't look like they promoted the streets as much as they did the sidewalks. So, with horse-drawn carriages, I don't know, but I would guess it's
gotta be something solid because they gotta have a good thing.
consistency to handle it.
Now, that actually a crane, like a steam engine, or was it interurban?
I don't know, these were, the early ones were horse-drawn. And then when they, at least downtown where they hooked up that wire, like in that very first picture where they had the electrical connection. But I assume that was, I'm not sure what. See, Tim, thanks for coming. My best customer ever. Top in, you were right there too. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, those trolleys were actually part of the Fort Wayne, Northern Indiana track. The power plant was right at the base of the railroad, and that's where the power came from, and they were completely separate from all the other lines that came in. Like Monon, the Wabash, the Lake Erie and so forth, completely separate lines because they operated as their own company running interurbans through Fort Wayne all the way down to Lafayette. But their company and their lines were all run by that company separate from everybody.
So they provided the electricity for it?
Yeah, they had.
And it was captured from above?
There's always above.
So even out on Owen Street. Then you can't even tell whether it's functional there, but maybe that power line played into it.
Because that line that you're seeing there is not attached to the pole. I think
You
it's
might enjoy that book I'm talking about, Eric, if you know a little bit about that, but I can just kind of scan through it there. Pretend like.
Where's that still here?
No, it's just available down at their main office. They have this building and then they have that one right on 10th Street. What's the name of that, Claire? Yeah, you walk in there or call ahead. They're only there on Thursdays and Fridays. But there's somebody to help you with research. I heard you have a book about the old trolley system and the trains and stuff, and they had it laying out for me. But they knew I was going to be doing this kind of stuff. But I don't know enough about it. I don't know about anything I said today. Remember that already? Ready to run anyway. I know that house, but I can't tell you where it is. Is that Sioux Street?
It's central.
He was a dentist.
So, probably original?
Yeah.
That little, what do you call that, dormer or build out or something there? You know, the other, Brian Lamb would have been my next door neighbor. Did we talk before? The C-SPAN Brian, and who really reveres his Purdue days, but just as much at high school, and who was his mentor there, Bill Frazier. Bill Frazier, you probably had him for class. But anyway, so he grew up right next door, and he's got that book notes book. I just have a paperback version of it. But he owns Highland Park, and he mentions the bicycle bridge was his metaphor for the unknown. If he grew up where he's 4 down from the bicycle bridge, and he was forbidden to cross, so he had all this curiosity. But in a paragraph or so, he mentions that the bicycle bridge stirred my curiosity about, what is out there, kind of like Peter Pan or something like that, who knows? A lot of cool houses. Now, somebody said in the 70s, we were talking about this 11, big houses didn't have as much appeal. So that's why I bought a small house. No, we had no idea we were in Highland Park or what was going on when we moved here in 1980. But so some of the houses were subdivided, and now there's something I read said there's only 2 or 3 now that are subdivided. Most have been restored, the single family homes with all they probably got new heating systems, and they probably put in fireplace inserts and did all kinds of things. But the houses, this is the house I was Margie
Fry.
Yeah, Margie Fry still lives there and has that big garden here. If you were having a brewski at the Krug and kind of looked down Highland Avenue right here, you'd see that right on the corner. It's a beautiful house, and it makes a great statement for the majesty of the houses in the original plan. And then my house and a lot of the others is 1923 houses. There's a lot of variety. We don't look like that, but in a way, we're called an English cottage, 1 story, 2 bedrooms. But we got, because the jeweler built it, we got little jeweler safes downstairs and a jeweler safe and little jeweler benches. That's the Kirby Risk House on Owen. Might be Taft. Does it look like him? Or no, William Jennings Bryant. Let's say it is. Yes. Remember? But you can drive right by that, but you won't see them out in the yard playing croquet. Now they're playing jarts. Can't do that anymore.
But they enclosed that whole front.
Yeah, it is kind of enclosed now, right? But you can see it there, and I don't know if that's, but with very few exceptions, there's one that kind of hurts me a little bit. People have restored those houses with clapboard or whatever, and not with siding. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, people, and I don't know where we are on this membership in the historic assignment and turning it over there. But if you read that little sign, which needs to be updated on the big triangle, you'll get a little bit of that. The architect, Cincinnati architects and the rail spur and all what was going on in the beginning. So, but the Kirby Risk house, so that's, I've got the paper there, there was Mr. Jim Risk, James Risk, I think, and then James, I think they're all James Kirby. And then Jim Risk, but none of his kids lived there. And then of course, Jim Risk built the house. You'll be able to see it as soon as the leaves fall. There on the other side of the entrance to the country club. But anyway, that's one of the originals. And a lot of attention to detail if you look up there, but I'm not your architectural guy.
It's kind of interesting, all the houses, all the pictures, they've got that here yard. The yard up near the house that's bigger, and then you've got little drop down to the sidewalk, and then you got the trees.
If you go to Perrin Avenue, you'll see that too, that they kind of have, the houses are built way far back. It's not all the way through, but you know what I'm talking about? just on the east side of town, if you're leaving on Ferry Street. And as soon as you start to go up, like you go out to the park and it splits. If you go left, you go to Murdoch Park and all those homes, Pete Pagan and some people living there. But there on Perrin Avenue, same thing you're talking about. I can't speak to it. What had to have been part of the original design might have had something to do with drainage.
Yeah. couldn't it?
Let's go with that. I think that's it. I'm around for questions. Go ahead.
Great job.
If anybody wants one of those, that poem, no charge.